All right, we are going to get started. I want to welcome you to the first session of panels that are part of the UW Art History Department's Centennial Symposium. I'm Anna Andrzejewski, for those of you that don't know me, and I had the privilege of chairing a wonderful committee of faculty and students and staff, the Centennial Committee. I'm also the Frank Lloyd Wright Professor of Modern American Architecture, and it's really a delight to welcome so many of you here today. A reminder that we are here today on ancestral land of the Ho-Chunk Nation, a place that their nation has called Dejop since time immemorial. In an 1832 treaty, the Ho-Chunk were forced to cede this territory. Decades of ethnic cleansing followed when both the federal and state government repeatedly but unsuccessfully sought to forcibly remove the Ho-Chunk from Wisconsin. We acknowledge the circumstances that led to the forced removal of the Ho-Chunk people and honor their legacy of resistance and resilience. This history of colonization informs our work and vision for a collaborative future. UW-Madison recognizes and respects the inherent sovereignty of the Ho-Chunk Nation and the other 11 Native nations within the boundaries of what we call the state of Wisconsin. Today's panel discussions follow a series of dynamic alumni panels that the department has hosted over the past 12 months. And I want to begin by encouraging our audience to be part of this. Far more than being simply celebratory of our illustrious past, we want to use these panels as an opportunity to look ahead, to reimagine what we can be in our next 100 years. So be part of the conversation. We've been very fortunate to be able to mount this year-long series of events, thanks to the generosity of the Anonymous Fund, the Dean's Office, and the College of Letters and Sciences, and our generous donors. We really want to thank these parties for making this series of events during our centennial year possible. We also extend our gratitude to the Chazen Museum of Art and its staff, whose partnership has allowed us to hold all of our events in their wonderful space. And in case you haven't noticed, the Elvium building is a little dark these days with its scaffolding. So really thank you to the Chazen. They've just been incredible. And I also want to acknowledge the Art History Department's absolutely phenomenal support staff, without whom this series would not have been possible. So Peggy Hacker and Jane McCarthy. Yeah, I like that. Thank you so much. We set a very high bar in difficult times with a $2 million fundraising campaign. And I'm not going to talk details, but tonight at the Centennial reception, following the panels, the reception begins at 5:30. We will share an update about the campaign and our results to date. And I'd encourage you to stay involved in the department. If you're so willing, consider supporting us for our future. We are particularly interested in gifts that support our undergraduate and graduate students, experience gifts, research internships, and research travel. And with that, I will turn it over to my colleague, Professor Jill Cassad, to introduce today's first panel. Thank you.
So welcome. I'm Jill Cassad, Professor of Visual Studies in the Departments of Art History and Gender and Women's Studies. And I want to start by thanking Centennial Chair Anna Andrzejewski for visionary leadership and organizational care. The Centennial Committee, Anna Andrzejewski, Tom Dale, Yu-Hong Lee, Teddy Call, Jane McCarthy, Gabriel Chazen, and Peggy Hacker for the honor of being invited to put together this panel of former students, now truly cherished colleagues, for the department's Centennial Symposium. I also want to thank Peggy Hacker and Jane McCarthy for the extraordinary care and support in making these events and gatherings possible. This panel is dedicated to showcasing how the UW-Madison Department of Art History has been a key locus for the vibrant efflorescence of work in feminist, crip, queer, trans, and indigenous approaches to art and its histories and futures. And I want to first, make clear that we will be in our program following what is online. From work with queer abstraction and trans aesthetics in the work of Lex Lancaster, and I'm featuring here work that began in conversation here at the UW-Madison, and I want you to understand that what I have on the screen for each is just a tiny portion of their work that they'll give you a teaser about. From work with queer abstraction and trans aesthetics in the work of Lex Lancaster, thinking the performative powers of and spaces between words and images, and listening as a technology of relation in the work of River and Kalada Butlick. The time image and queer, feminist, and decolonial research-based curation in the work of Amy L. Powell. To crypt materiality and crypt curation in the work of Jessica A. Cooley. And rematriation and indigenous museum practices in the work of Kendra Greendeer. We have already been doing the work of world building and unbuilding. And as I put it in my own research, what I call doing things with being undone. And if there were ever a moment in which we need skill in doing things with being undone, it would be now. We take the occasion of our centennial that also comes at a moment of nearly unprecedented challenge as a chance to gather force in convening, to share our work and think creatively together about the tactics and strategies required of us now. So a word on the structure for our panel. We're using our 75 minutes together for approximately 45 minutes of sharing out, and then we'll turn to brief discussion. Participants have been asked to prepare flash presentations of approximately 7 minutes each. These flash teasers of research will be followed by brief discussion that I'll moderate. I have learned from Black feminist theorist Catherine McKittrick and the exercise adapted from McKittrick's Pedagogy and Mentorship by Eugenia Zorowski, the importance of asking and acknowledging, where do you know from? I know and continue to learn from many places, but especially and in an ongoing way from the chance to think with my current students and with the former students, now extraordinary colleagues who have returned to Madison for our session together. For our discussion, each has been asked to share a reflection regarding a lasting impression from training at the UW-Madison. And then each will share something about how we're envisioning preparing for the future and or tactics for doing our work now. And if there were ever a moment in which we need each other, it would also be now. So to conserve on time, I will be showing slides with the participants' bios, and again, a reminder that we'll be going in order of presentation. So we'll be starting with Lex Morgan Lancaster, Assistant Professor of History and Theory of Art at Cooper Union. I am so excited for this presentation. I'm just going to pull up Lancaster's slides.
Okay, thanks to CASID for bringing us together. It's an honor to be with you all today. So those who are familiar with CASID's work know that they are particularly fond of the form of the manifesto, or numbered theses that activate a set of aesthetic, material, political tactics. So in honor of CASID, who taught me to think and write in and through the most difficult eroding conditions, I offer 3 theses on trans aesthetics. This is work that's leading to my second book project. 1, trans aesthetics create embodied encounters rather than categories of appearance. In Nothing New, the artist known as Puppies installed a facsimile of her bedroom filled with chroma green decor in the new museum's lobby gallery. Cameras recorded her movement around the city with a live feed to the screen in the lobby. She could also control her visibility by fogging the glass when she was present in the gallery. When she does appear, her form is cast against the green screen hue that signals a surface for projection and transformation. Critical attention to this work focuses on the trans artist who navigates surveillance, mediating her visibility in the public sphere. When considering what is trans about an art practice, there's a tendency to focus on what either appears or doesn't, and this is often about a trans body as content. But I argue that trans aesthetics of this work mobilize the vulnerability at play in aesthetics, which I'm using in terms of sense experience and perception, not appearances. Following a queer of color and crip understanding of aesthetics, I use trans aesthetics to describe how the work produces affective, somatic experiences of encounter in which the spectator is vulnerably embodied. Nothing new works by making us aware of ourselves watching, soliciting the viewer in an intimate exchange within the discomforting conditions of surveillance. This is not an intimacy that makes known, but produces a heightened awareness of the glass screen that allows us to feel ourselves seeing from an intimate distance. Here, the green screen creates a space in which we might also learn to see differently. Rather than making this about the trans artist offering herself up to the cis gaze, I think this makes the conditions of surveillance a somatic site that we navigate together and in which the spectator's embodied position cannot be predetermined. Rather than ask how transness is made available to us through form or content, I'm asking how aesthetics are used to produce environments of relational encounter in which we play an essential role. 2, trans aesthetics are not just about gender and sex. Rather, a set of political tactics forged from the material conditions that make it hard to keep moving, trans aesthetics works with the dis-ease brought on by systemic dispossession and violence. Following the work of scholars who make generative use of trans negativity, I argue that trans aesthetics stay with and mobilize the bad feeling of a trans affective commons, and this is also a way of activating what Jill Cassad calls doing things with being undone. By working with the material processes of deformation and decay, practices mobilized by those already not considered human, including more than human agencies. Keon Williams's Ruins of Empire is a monumental figure emerging from the soil in Brooklyn Bridge Park, sculpted from hardened earth in the shape of the neoclassical bronze Statue of Freedom that tops the US Capitol building, which was built by enslaved laborers. Williams drags this presumed symbol of democracy down to the ground where it decomposes. Birds nested on it, insects invaded its body. Their piece for last year's Whitney Biennial is the sequel, a reproduction of the White House portico in ruins. Over time, it is also collapsed, sprouted seeds, housed and birthed insects, making live ruins from degrading symbols built by those whose lives were stolen and deemed not human. Williams mobilizes non-compliant matter to undermine the logics of violence these forms represent, what the artist calls decomposition as decolonization. And also signal here that this is also in conversation with Jessica Cooley's concept of crypt materiality, which we'll probably hear about in a bit. The gritty materiality of their work, cultivating life forms that persist, transmute, and emerge from the vital matter of shattered ruins, forge alternative ways of sensing and being from within, even as one is othered and objectified from without. Williams demonstrates how one might work with the unmanageable legacies that continue to materialize in the present and the transformative capacities of those materials. Their trans aesthetics both make us uneasy and help us to cultivate ways of navigating the world otherwise and in spite of what erodes us. 3, trans aesthetics cultivate heightened spectatorial sensitivity as ethics of care. Through these fugitive material encounters, trans aesthetics nurture our capacities for embodied sensitivity. This is not the same as empathy. It's not that everyone can feel somehow what it's like to be trans in these situations, but rather a deeper attunement in and through difficult conditions. In P. Staff's film On Venus, which is part of a larger multisensory environment, of the same title. Distorted clips show the industrial farming of animals for food, hormones, and reproductive purposes. This grainy footage is further fragmented and filtered by acrid hues. Against an unsettling soundtrack of warped voices, animals are confined, beaten, and cut open, and our nerves are increasingly frayed. The multisensory work induces our capacity to feel what we witness, stimulating a sensory connection with those animal bodies. We are faced with the violence and exploitation we might otherwise ignore as though it were happening on another planet, but in which we are chemically enmeshed. Transesthetics work our nervous systems to expand our capacities for vulnerable attunement, materializing methods for navigating the biopolitical and ecological forces that shape our bodies and lives. How do we inhabit these uninhabitable worlds? How do we work with what it feels like to exist in spaces that are deeply inhospitable and make some lives nearly impossible? Making our bodies sensitive in relation to other bodies and environments, transesthetics cultivates embodied responses that have the capacity to change us, making new worlds possible. Thank you.
Ooh, okay. You're already seeing the ways in which we're also already deep in conversation and excited to feature more. So our next presenter is River Encolada Bullock, collection specialist in the Department of Drawings and Prints at the Museum of Modern Art, New York. And for those of you who may have just joined us, I'm conserving on time by showing the bios on the screen.
Hello. I came to UW-Madison in 2012 to study with Cassid, to learn more about how you understand or understood decolonial tactics. And while I was a queer kid, I had no idea the impact that being schooled in queer theory would have on my thinking and being in the world. My world has been remade again and again during coursework, writing, and in the subsequent years of incredible mentorship. I'm so grateful to you. Thank you. My current project, extending from my dissertation, Listening to Contemporary Art, Vocality as a Technology of Relation, looks to museums and galleries as spaces of artistic experimentation, spaces that can activate exchange between people and communities, and can serve as vehicles for transformative contact through encounters with difference. I attend to artists' use of voice and vocality in works of art that call on us to listen, and yet frustrate our capacity to hear. I engage a range of practices, from Adrienne Piper's use of recitation in her 1971 durational performance, Food for the Spirit, in which she immerses herself in the study of Immanuel Kant's Critique of Pure Reason. A consideration of Anna Mendieta's use of breath as vocality in her 1974 film, Grass Breathing. And Paulina Oliveros' 1970 composition to Valerie Solanas and Marilyn Monroe in recognition of their desperation, for the ways it deploys desperation as dissonance and as affective force. I demonstrate how these artists use vocality within the space of the art idea, the audience's mind, and the gallery to alter sensory dynamics and to change us. This inquiry laid the groundwork for my curatorial methodology. I began this project to learn from and respond to a group of artists who seemed to be asking something of us, to configure a conversation across time and to listen to how they use their voices to direct our attention. How do we formulate methods for attending to the complex assemblage that vocality constitutes? I first asked this question as a response to Nina Simone's performance of the pop song Feelings at the 1976 Montreux Jazz Festival. From the stage, Simone confesses to having become a robot and asks the audience to help her remember her feelings of love. The fierce tenderness of Simone's voice, its oscillation between steadiness and a shaky swell draws us in, and her virtuosic finesse on the piano is punctuated by intermittent pleas to the audience. "Feed me," she says, demanding that the audience fuel her by singing the song back. Communicating her need and desire, Simone insists on collaboration. In his book, In the Break, Fred Moten says, quote, "The aftersound is more than a bridge. No need to dismiss the sound that emerges from the mouth as the mark of separation," end quote. Simone's song bridges a freedom in improvisation and a bondage to an audience that psychically motors her. The call and response of sounding and listening in Simone's performance of Feelings is foundational to my understanding of listening and my engagement with vocality. Here, intersectionality exists not only within the individual, that is the multiple positionalities of gender, sex, race, ability, class, nation, and so on, nor only in the animative material of her performance, the aesthetic, political, sexual, racial, or affective forces assembled in the voice of Nina Simone, but also in the relations between the call and the response, the performer and the spectator as listener. At a moment when the disintegration of human rights is unrelenting and forms of dissent can seem to fold under the pressures of fascist state power, it becomes increasingly imperative to feed one another. Through listening and calling back, you are not alone, you've never been alone. In this moment, I call on listening to one another as a practice of love, a practice of care, and as a critical methodology for curatorial practice. I'll share quickly 4 anecdotes and propositions for understanding the relations of listening as curatorial practice. Listening as support. During the installation of Narcissister's exhibition, Studies for Participatory Sculptures at Participant, it became clear to the artists that each of the 200 some odd collages would be supported by a title. As we installed the works, Narcissister and I talked through the collage elements, and she identified a title, which I wrote down. Together, we created a document that supported the conceptual framework of the show. Listening as critical attention. Over the course of 2 years, I worked with the composer and performer M. Lamar and curator Leah Gangitano on Negro Gothic, an anthology of writing on the artist published by Participant Press. As managing editor of the project, this was an opportunity to engage with others writing about vocal materiality and encourage attention to listening in their work. Listening as bringing together. I had the opportunity to collaborate with curator Sarah Meister on an exhibition and publication of Dorothea Lange's work, and helped bring together a group of artists, writers, and thinkers to consider the ongoing political resonances of Lange's work in our present. Listening as thinking alongside. In working with curator Lucy Gallen and artist Ito Barada on her Artist Choice exhibition, I found that Ito needed to think out loud. We spent hours on the telephone, talking through the ideas of French social work pioneer Fernand Delaney and the experimental network, where he lived together with other volunteers and children with intellectual and developmental disabilities in rural France. This was during the 70s. This was an attempt to create a way of living outside language and adapted for the children, many of whom were nonverbal. Listening as curatorial practice shifts depending on the artist, the parameters of the work, and the location we find ourselves. In each instance, listening is a way for me to be present and responsive to the work of collaboration and curatorial care. Thanks.
You can see how these are weaving together. And following River Bullock, I'm excited to have with us Amy L. Powell, Curator of Modern and Contemporary Art at the Krannert Art Museum, and also Curator of Campus Arts Research in the Office of Arts Integration at the University of Illinois, Urbana-Champaign. And again, the abbreviated bio on the screen.
Good afternoon, everyone. It's such a pleasure to be here and among this group of esteemed panelists. Thank you to Jill and to the department for inviting me back to Madison. It's such a joy. When I consider a research agenda for curating contemporary art after intersectionality, I appreciate the opportunity to face a long simmering curiosity that I'm feeling now with renewed urgency. And that is that I want to locate and cultivate an outside. By this, I mean that I want to ask about the potential and practice of curatorial work to exceed and thrive outside the institutions that we're also transforming, or at least trying to, of higher education and the art museum. I've come to realize that many, well, really all of the artists I've worked with over the last 15 years address and solicit an outside in ways that I want to mark more intentionally in my work and learn from. To what end is an open question for me. Can I embrace the outside in the planning phases of next projects? Am I charting my exit? Certainly not, but to where? I'm unsure, but I want to voice the burning question today so that I might find community discussing it together. I feel like now is a kind of renewed moment to practice and mobilize critique into practice now, and this is the question. Since graduating from the department, I've been a curator of contemporary art in university art museums, and I've also stretched beyond museum walls by leveraging university resources to support artists. In these roles, I often describe my work like this. I invite artists into the research environment as agitators of significant change to break with status quo and model other possible worlds, with special emphasis on engaging pressing dialogues in Black liberation, anti-colonial practices, and queer strategies of relation and expression. For whom are other possible worlds modeled and the status quo broken? In my work, as I balance and move among several projects simultaneously, and then one after another, I find that I, or my work, at least at this moment, is in relation to institution too much. It pushes back, it reforms itself in its land grant mission. It becomes increasingly corporatized and STEM-focused. It is severely and willfully understaffed and under-resourced for its claims and ambitions. It refuses to disclose and divest. I need an outside. Even as I say frequently, and
coming on the heels of River's presentation. I really feel this. We do this work in relation as collective acts of care and labor and love. Yes, working among artists, curators, and scholars on each project and shaping that arc of inquiry that unfolds over time. Curatorial work models and allows for collaboration and relation in ways that institutions cannot always prize. We do this work for each other, and exhibitions are already porous with the outsides that artists bring into the fray. With that long preamble, and maybe less of a cry for help now that we're here together, I'll discuss one project that was on view in 2024 at Krannert Art Museum that I co-organized with Dr. Blair Ebony Smith, who's my colleague at Illinois. She's a scholar of Black girlhood, a DJ, and a sound and visual artist. On screen, we're seeing a citation of Fred Moten's Air Shaft Rent Party chapter from his book Stolen Life, Consent Not to Be a Single Being. This is the chapter that announces a new political party that's not really in the academy, and that might be a riot, and the kind of party that I belong to and that I would very much like to join. The citation in this instance is performing the dynamic of inside-outside. The text is fragmented by multiple surfaces. It's not singular, and it's not really completely legible. These particular surfaces are at a bar and nightclub in Urbana, Illinois, that's decidedly outside institutions, and yet at the same time leverage to the best of their ability university funding for state-of-the-art immersive projection and sound. Gallery Art Bar, come to Urbana, and I'll take you there. It's really great. This image belongs to a performance lecture by Madison Moore called Pump the Beat, Queer Nightlife at the Edge. This work by Madison distills and performs their scholarship and activation of queer Black nightlife, from their mother's weekly skate nights to the clubs they enjoy now in Berlin and London, to rural Midwestern places, all of which are precarious destinations for joy and sex and style. Blair and I organized Madison's performance as part of an exhibition of Jen Everett's work. Everett is a St. Louis-based artist and educator who's been in conversation with Madison Moore about queer art and venues in the Midwest for some time, and we invited Madison to be an interlocutor for the exhibition. The show was called Could You Dim the Lights? And in the exhibition text, Blair and I wrote, "This exhibition is a wholehearted exploration of darkened Black queer spaces, the club, the dance floor, the family rooms of Everett's childhood, and grief for their precarity. It is an invitation to self and other Black queer people to make and create spaces to be at home." There were a number of photographic textures and registers in the exhibition. Jen printed a couple of large-scale photographs on vinyl, and we adhered them directly to the wall, or sometimes these vinyl photographs hung loosely, like banners. There were photographic and sonic objects from Jen's childhood home and her personal and familial archives, ticket stubs, a photograph of Josephine Baker, a Tracy Chapman cassette tape, photos of Everett as a child, the brass flask her mother would take into Detroit nightclubs. This is the group of objects installed is called Leave a Room Better for having been there. There was a sound installation called Toughness, looping a phrase from a speech by Audre Lorde. That was there on the sound dome that you see. There were photographs printed on fine paper and framed. The variety of mediums is intentional in Everett's work, mixing high and low and providing multiple forms of access and possibility with economies of display. Everett writes and speaks about rupture to describe and respond to the upheavals in Black life in the United States. In her work, rupture becomes an aesthetic and a special ethics of care and intimacy. She remixes private and community-based photo archives in search of lesbian presence, doubling an image or isolating a detail to affect the viewer's sense of time and rhythm, a slowing down and insistence on close looking and feeling. Everett made these works on screen using high-quality scans from the Peter J. Cohen collection of vernacular photographs in New York. Those original photographs subsequently were gifted to Krannert Art Museum. And the works that Everett made in this slide are citations from the Gerber Hart Library and Archives in Chicago, from magazines and other ephemera she found on her visits to this really important community-driven lending library resource. The riotous convergence of Madison Moore's performance and Everett's exhibition left me curious about the art museum as a potentially unapologetically non-neutral and exclusive space, like a well-curated club with a generous and yet highly selective door policy. Moore writes in their book, Fabulous, The Rise of the Beautiful Eccentric, quote, "Clubs fail us, I think, when they try too hard to be everything to everyone." The incommensurability of artists' projects inside institutions is often what motivates me to undertake a project. Those irreconcilable questions that a curator can pose by serving as an intellectual partner to artists and as an operator between artist and institution. Realizing exhibitions, programs, books, in a way, at this moment, that's been the easy part. I'm more reflective now about how to sustain what happens after the exhibitions come and go, now in our moment of multiple intersecting crises in the US and the conditions we work under and witness, and about all the ways that artists demonstrate the outside. Thank you.
I want to think we're creating a club in here. So our next presentation is from Jessica A. Cooley, postdoctoral curatorial and teaching fellow at the Haggerty Museum of Art in Marquette University. And I'm just going to pull up the slides.
Hi, thank you all for being here. In this paper, I make the claim towards the end that form follows support, and I just wanted to note that my form has certainly followed the support that I have received from CASID, from the department, and from my beloved friends. So thank you. When I first introduced my concept of crypt materiality, I argued that ableism, the belief that disability is an inferior state of being, affects not only how we value human bodies, but also how we understand and value art objects, their chemical structures, fabrication, curation, and conservation. It does so partly by framing some materials, those understood to be unintentionally deteriorating, as having inherent vice, a characterization that moralizes fragility by treating deterioration as failure. Such language reveals the pervasive nature of ableism that insidiously affects all things, not just human beings. It was Klaus Oldenburg's 1978 polyurethane sculpture, Soft Screw, that is right upstairs at the Chazen Museum of Art, that first sparked this line of inquiry. As some of you may know, Soft Screw is unexpectedly reverting to a liquid state. And a few months ago, I was invited to write a short essay for the journal Material Intelligence. They dedicate their issues to a single material like leather or wax or paper, and they asked if I would consider the implications of crypt materiality in terms of acrylics deterioration. I decided to investigate not acrylic paint, but acrylic sheets. At first, I assumed acrylic sheets must deteriorate in the same way that some plastics do. But the research surprised me. Acrylic sheets, what is technically called polymethyl methacrylate, PMMA, and more often known by its trade names of plexiglass, perspex, or lucite, is valued precisely because it is durable, lightweight, and resistant to deterioration. So I started back at the beginning, just thinking about where I encounter acrylic sheets most often. And it struck me that acrylic sheets are, in some ways, the ever-present yet often unnoticed medium of the museum. And not because they are frequently used by artists, but because as you move around the museum or gallery space, you will see them everywhere as they encase and support and cover much of the art on display, and sometimes, in fact, comprise the architectural elements of the museum itself. Acrylic's history reinforces this role, first developed in Germany during World War II as a shatterproof substitute for glass in aircraft cockpits, and later revolutionizing prosthetics, especially prosthetic eyes. Acrylic sustains and supports, offering customizable support to human bodies and art objects alike. And so unexpectedly, this research brought me right back to soft screw, but now with a focus on something I had not attended to before, the acrylic supports that sustain it. I began to think deeply about how this custom cut and padded acrylic mount that holds soft screw participates in a longer history of prosthetic care, where solid acrylics have been fashioned into dentures, contact lenses, bone cements, and facial prostheses. But this is not just a tidy metaphor of acrylic as prosthetic. What's at stake is a logic of prosthetics, where fit, integration, and maintenance are constitutive infrastructure. And this is the domain of mount making, the museum practice of designing and fabricating custom supports that secure, stabilize, and display works according to their particular needs. In 1978, the same year Oldenburg created soft screw, Philip R. Ward published an essay titled "In Support of Difficult Shapes." He wrote that, quote, "At every stage in an object's museum life, we are concerned with its proper support, because all materials have weight and all are, to some extent, flexible. These two factors multiplied by a third time will eventually result in damage if the object is not suitably supported," close quote. Ward identifies time as the third factor that inevitably alters an object, and he stresses that mounts should be designed as preventative care rather than reactive afterthoughts. I want to build on this by suggesting we might add a fourth factor, the support itself. Because supports aren't just preventative, they are productive. That is, they produce form. Even as they stabilize, mounts actively shape what an object becomes. So take soft screw. The acrylic cradle does more than simply hold it in place. It decides how the object leans, how much sag is permitted, and over time, the points of contact shape, not just support. These are not neutral acts. They are decisions about form. The mount co-produces what the sculpture is and becomes. This unsettles our usual categories. We want to distinguish between work and mount, between the object's form and the measures that preserve it, yet in practice, those boundaries don't hold. Soft screw today is not polyurethane alone, it is polyurethane formed by and with an acrylic cradle. And this is not an accident or an unfortunate compromise. The accommodation is not passive. It is not an inert addition sitting alongside the real work. It is a shaping force in the object's ongoing aesthetic life. The acrylic has agency. It fixes orientation, holds the angle, even sets the tempo of change. I believe this asks us to, in fact, rethink the impact of accommodations. Sometimes accommodations are imagined as enabling function without changing form, the prosthetic that lets a body participate while leaving the real body, or in this case, the real artwork, unchanged. In practice, accommodations alter. The acrylic cradle that supports soft screw, its geometry, height, horizontal orientation, and contact points sets the condition for the work's form. Gravity consolidates the ooze at the terminal edge rather than it running down the vertical face. Pads distribute load and over time impress the sides. Form follows support. The task is to recognize and account for the forms that accommodations produce. All right, thank you.
I feel as though I take you all with me whenever I see an exhibition or walk into a museum, and always find myself attuning differently. And I love the way this makes us rethink accommodation. And last but not at all least, I am excited to welcome Kendra Greendeer, Ihlenfeld Curator of Collaborative and Community Exhibitions at the Weissman Art Museum at the University of Minnesota. And again, the biography on the screen to save time. I'm just going to pull up your slides.
First of all, I want to, thank Dr. Cassad for bringing us all together, and it's wonderful to share space with you all today. Today I'll be discussing my work highlighting rematriation within 2 Indigenous place-based artistic practices. I'll be discussing my work, the first material being clay, the central focus of an upcoming exhibition, Wabagonake, at the Weissman Art Museum, and the other weegwas, or birch bark, which I explore in a recent publication in the catalog for contemporary Anishinaabe art, a continuation that opens actually this Sunday at the Detroit Institute of Arts. And while here, a lot of my work centered around refining rematriation and its and this movement alongside contemporary Indigenous art practices. So my definition for rematriation is the Indigenous woman-led movement for returning self and community to pre-settler teachings while honoring life and those that allow for livingness. And I've also been expanding this to femininity in general. So this is expanding on some of the questions I was considering while here at UW, and through a lot of Jill's support on recognizing temporality. So expanding on that and its role within the rematriation movement, I had the opportunity to explore a medium and material that's always brought me back to home in this region, that being weegwas or birch bark. Because I'm Ojibwe from my mother, there has always been this maternal comfort when I consider that what this being does, shapes containers, it covers homes, and also is found within decor. And so within this essay, I state, quote, while many Indigenous arts recognize the coalescence of various periods, the art form that uses birch bark disrupts the parameters of traditional or contemporary Native art due to spiral temporality that exists within it, end quote. So while here I began unpacking the timeline or this colonial structure of how we organize time or recognize time, and but found that while the circle or cyclical time is often attributed to Indigenous ideologies, I felt that the spiral recognized this more. The spiral offers a recognition of seasons and the opportunity to revisit elements of life that reconnect to other perceived moments in time. So this is expanding on the work of Kyle P. White, who's a Potawatomi scholar, who discusses with the Anishinaabe expression Anakub Chigan, meaning ancestor and descendant at the same time. And so of this contributing interaction, with this contributing interaction of ancestor and descendant, when we engage in actions of our ancestors, we, human and tree, or in this instance, birch bark, are entangling ourselves within a spiraling time. And I don't necessarily limit this engagement of a spiralic temporality to weak wasps, but find it representative in many material uses in contemporary Indigenous arts as well. So moving to another exploration of another medium, this poster has been on display in the ancient Traders Market entrance for years. So alongside Franklin Ave in Minneapolis, if you're familiar, by Maria's Cafe, this poster has been passed by numerous community members, and it recognized an individual working to teach people about a pre-settler medium of ceramics, or in particular, before the black kettles came. And this is a medium that I've always been aware of because when my mother was working in Bemidji when I was a child, she always remembered hearing that there were two women near Cass Lake working to revitalize traditional Ojibwe ceramics. And I didn't recognize that this exhibition research would bring me to finding those two women she was talking about and the ceramic legacy and impact they still have today. So at the center of this exhibition that foregrounds a rematriation praxis is the artist Carrie Ann Metig Wagani Wanumkwe Esti, who had passed away in 2010, but has left a lasting impression and guidance for clay practices in the Ojibwe communities in Minnesota. Carrie learned about Ojibwe ceramic traditions from a non-Indigenous archaeologist and worked to recreate these vessels in similar form as our ancestors did. They spoke to the place she was ancestrally connected to. Even the name White Earth suggests the clay, and this has also made me realize how often Indigenous languages have named places as it relates to the clay and colors of clay found there. So Esti recognized the spiritual and ancestral significance of these works, and often featuring human figures with both male and female features, or most often known as two-spirit beings, embracing the rim of these vessels. And in her drawing to the left, she includes two human figures embracing an ancestral black duck-style pot. In the background are ethereal figures of Anishinaabe spiritual beings and animals along the coast of a lake, possibly suggesting the Ojibwe migration and creation story. She is expressing the origins and life within clay and earth and artistic practices. And in the image on the right is the top of a pit-fired clay piece that foregrounds her efforts of this rebalancing and reconnection that she emphasizes within her ceramics practice. And so this exhibition I'm developing at the Weissman Art Museum is Wabagonake. He works or plays with clay, examines how contemporary Ojibwe ceramicists practice pottery as a socially and ancestrally engaged art form, and how their artistry asserts continuity and restores knowledge of historic ceramics in Ojibwe culture. In my research, I've encountered those that feel, or others that have encountered people who feel very strongly against a ceramic practice ever existing in the community, which I've recognized is it's been lost through a process of colonization. And also, in addition to that, with attributions to woodland pottery being designated to other communities. So there was an Ojibwe ceramics tradition. These works created using local clay and ancestral vessels were often decorated with distinctive patterns created using cord-wrapped paddles, stamps, or incised designs. Ojibwe pottery was functional and used for cooking, storage, and ceremonial purposes before European contact. And Carrie recognized the re-education that needed to happen within the community. So both her cousin, and later her daughter taught numerous workshops around White Earth, Bemidji, and Cass Lake until her passing in 2010. Her cousin, Judy Toppings, who was her student and colleague in rematriating ceramics traditions in the White Earth community, shared this practice with her children as well. And so in the image on the left is Carrie teaching a workshop. In the image on the right is Judy in the background, facilitating her grandchildren, I believe. And since Judy's passing in 2021, her daughter Janet and granddaughter Eliza Clare have continued to share through workshops the practice of clay harvesting, processing, building, and pit firing. So the image on the left features a laurel-style vessel and white clay drilled discs for jewelry or decoration. Wabaganake, he works or plays with clay will feature a selection of Ojibwe ceramicists who intervene in the misunderstood or unknown history of ceramic culture from the Western Great Lakes region. And within the show, the 11 artists were selected by myself and WAM's 24 to 25 O'Brien Curatorial Fellow Jude Pettit, who is also a descendant of the White Earth community. And grouping these artists highlights a collective cultural significance. Ceramic as a regional and Ojibwe medium is one that has had community opposition because of the long history of colonization and teachings that have been lost in the process of erasing Indigenous history. By highlighting these 11 artists, the Weissman is asserting their collective contributions towards igniting ceramic and a tradition of earthen artistic practice. Not only in Carrie's practice did she emphasize this collective power in restoring an Anishinaabe art form and its teachings about earth, Indigenous gender, and two-spirit teachings, but through this process, engaging in this return, informed by a spiralic temporality, Ojibwe community is rematriating this practice to the community so the teachings and connection to earth or clay can continue to nourish us spiritually, mentally, and physically. Thank you.
So I'm going to ask everyone to come up to the table and those were beautiful presentations. Thank you so much. I know it's an incredible challenge to condense this complex and multifaceted work into just a small tidbit. So let's start, please, with sharing something from your training here.
I'll go first. Well, I was actually just thinking about how I think the paper I just presented really comes directly out of some of the key things I learned as a student here, which is the ability to pivot in a way. I remember going to talk to Cassid at one point about where I was with the project, and I was feeling overwhelmed, and Cassid gave me the very good advice of, make it work. No matter where you are in the process, you can always find a way to make it work. In other words, redirection itself is not a sign of failure, but actually it's where some of our greatest research comes from, when we look into something and we think we know where we're going, and then oops, it turns out that's not it. And then you keep working. So anyway, there you go, to pivot.
Well, and we're all really having to learn how to pivot right now. Thank you, Jessica.
Shall I continue down this way?
Sure,
I guess we can go down the line.
A lot of lasting impressions. I did a field school with Anna Andrzejewski to North Dakota, and I didn't realize that was 7 years ago already today. But I think that encouragement to try different approaches, to utilize different methods that aren't always considered in art history, and to explore has been the most helpful for me. Also, I know in different spaces where there is like very steeped in tradition or to art historical practice, that I'm very appreciative of how much I was encouraged to engage with interdisciplinary practices here, and encouraged to go to different departments, take courses with those from other disciplines, and and I think through that North Dakota trip in particular, that's when I was really trying to unpack the timeline, and and I just appreciate that that was encouraged to pursue.
Thank you, Kendra.
So I think the first thing that came to mind, or that I remembered that was pretty notable, is curating this exhibition, which I haven't been to the Elvium. I don't know what is happening over there, but it did exist in, I guess, what maybe when I left was the Hagen Room. But in any case, I was doing this is kind of a exhibition project in 2 parts called Our House, about queering domesticity, and Cassid was so supportive of this project, and the department supported me doing it here, even though at the time those who were in power at the Chazen did not support it, but they backed me up. And Cassid's work was in it, Anna Campbell's work was in it, and it was very like queer spit and glue kind of project, but Cassid like took it very seriously. Like, people really they took me seriously, which helped me take myself seriously as well. So
Always, and the Hagen Room is where that space is now. Yeah. But there's an echo.
Yeah, I guess I'll jump in to say that the power of the burning question is what came to mind first, and just the encouragement to follow a question with, and to be okay with not knowing. This is often, across coursework, followed by, like the importance and encouragement to do close readings, which for me, began to translate into close listening or deep listening. And so those sort of like foundational methodological prompts of the question, and slowing down to spend time with the question, but also our objects of study.
Oh, I'm loving the burning question recurring.
Yeah, I think I mentioned it.
Yes.
Everything everyone's saying is really resonating with me and my experience here. And absolutely, we were making things real. We're not, that seminar table might move around the room with the real questions we're asking, but what we're also doing things. So it's no coincidence that we all presented on the things that we're making real. So that happened here. Just a couple of other things for me were the strength of what we called at the time area studies departments. So I'm sort of equally at home in African studies, in women and gender studies here, and took courses, or at least was very close with Teju Alanian, Susan Stanford Friedman, Aliko Songolo, and sort of immersed in African cinema, for instance. I was able to do that here. And then just quickly, all the artists that came over and took seminars with us, you know, at the time, maybe still they were in a different college, so structurally it was a challenge, but having to think around the seminar table with filmmakers and makers, and having makers in the art history department itself was such an enormous benefit.
Oh, I love the making things real. Also, the echo of the seminar table is the seance. You never know quite where it's going to go, but that's part of the magic. I wanted to also ask you all to share something about what you're finding can motivate your practice, what tools you're able to make or use in this moment of perhaps having to pivot, to start.
I was thinking about this, and I think a lot about the disability justice movement and what the lessons we learn from difficult times. And it actually brought me back to, I think, maybe the first month I was on campus as a new student here, and Cassid had a sort of intro to how to be successful as a grad student. And I don't remember lots of things, but I do remember one thing about it, which was you almost looked at me, I felt like, and you said, it's your network, it's your community that's going to get you through this. The people you're sitting around the table with and discussing are not just, you know, other fellow students. These are your colleagues. These are going to make you successful or help you be successful. And I do still think that this idea of community and really being with people we love and talking with them and just being in communities is going to be the thing that actually allows for us to pivot, allows for us to do that work. So I'm really grateful for just all of you. Yeah, okay.
Oh man, it's hard to No, well said, Jessica. Yeah, that's probably been the best tool to rely on right now. Yeah, and I think just adding on to that, I think the basis for my work is also just trying to find that connection, because I think it's just a long history of how Indigenous art discipline has been shaped by other fields and other ways in which separation or compartmentalization has happened. And I think that's why I generally focus on a more holistic Indigenous art theory that can be applied to many communities, because I think, yeah, if we're continuously finding ways to divide ourselves, that just makes some of these difficult times, makes us even more vulnerable.
Yeah, I think community came up right away. I was also thinking about this moment in a graduate seminar where Cassid asked us something like, how do you do your no? Sounds like something you'd ask us, right? Yeah.
I definitely asked you that.
Yeah, good, okay.
I ask myself that all the time.
Good, great, yeah. So that's, yeah, and I said, by doing it anyway, in spite of the sort of not or the can't, whether external or internalized. And it's been a sort of mantra ever since. So, you know, I mean, I'm writing a book about trans art practice in an environment that's deeply hostile to our existence and perhaps doesn't even believe that we do exist. So doing it anyway, doing it in community. Spite can also be a pretty useful tool. So, yeah.
Yeah, I guess the question that I'm thinking about is like, how do we stay connected to community or build community? And for me, just like thinking about the past week, how have I been doing that? It is really like picking up the phone and making time to have conversations with people in person, and also like making time for artists. So whether that's like going to their studio or meeting them to talk through something, I think for me that feels especially important, to just make time.
Yeah, I think early in my career after school, I had a particularly challenging project. And I remember Jill saying to me, well, the things worth doing are usually pretty difficult. And I've carried that with me for a number of reasons, but also just to remember to pause and slow down when those difficult things get realized, when the book is published, when the artist is able to build the thing they wanted to build, even though the university didn't want them to, or, whatever it might be. And that's a kind of community too, right? And I'll also just say, every time I'm able to get together with you, it's, I feel just completely buoyed and, carry that with me. And so I'm glad for moments like this, because this is the community that we built here and that we sort of carry out and bring back together. So thank you.
Well, I realize that we have used up much of our time. I do want to be sure that we have 2 minutes, according to my watch, for the next session, to offer some space for a question response. I'm so grateful to see so many faces gathered in this room, that also feels like making real this connection. Anybody?
I can offer a method to find tools, which is we're art historians to look at history. It is not the first time that there's been repression, suppression, to look toward what happened at that time to survive and to thrive and to go forward. So I could remind a method to find the tools. Could you repeat that?
And so the recommendation is to look to history to find methods and tools that what we're encountering has happened before. And we can think here also about the ways that so much of the contemporary practice here is in fact rethinking precisely the imposition of particular forms of colonial history. So what does it take to unlearn mythology and to actually learn the buried knowledges that have been denied us? Anybody else?
I just have a comment. I wanted to thank you all for all your reflections. I recently encountered what Sally Kitchen, other researchers from the environmental humanities, propose as the stakeholders toolkit. And it was lovely to hear the questions that they raised, also echoed in this room today, questions such as, when do I listen? What is the largest construct that holds me? So I think we heard different answers to that all conjoin and create this sense of community. So thank you very much.
Well, and I appreciated that that question of what is the largest construct that holds me, but also what are the invisible supports that we also need to attend to as they're being taken away and denied. Oh, okay, two more. Henry and then Jennifer, and then we'll.
Yes, I just want to say that you have shown us the potential of continuing creativity as you've gone beyond the bounds of the structures and the limits and the boundaries that have been placed there, that you have transcended and continue to transcend communally and individually. I think it's great work. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Henry. And then the question is how to sustain that creativity. Jennifer?
And I apologize. I came in late. I had some things to do, but I apologize if some of you have already addressed this. I'm just kind of curious on a practical level, what have you kind of found most surprising as you kind of left the embrace of UW and got into the working world? You know, how did reality, reality compared to this, a different reality compared to this reality? What did you find surprising?
So the question is, what did you find surprising in the new reality? And just, one quick, very fast.
Just really, I would say that you don't just leave, right? Like we're still here. I am still in conversation with this community all the time, and so there isn't, for me at least, a big, shift. Hi, I see you guys all the time.
Well, and this is real too.
Yeah.
I'd say that I like that you use the word cocoon. Not everyone had the training that we had, or the kind of commitments, I suppose, political commitments to why we do what we do, and encountering those either as barriers or as opportunity to be in community and co-educate, or, for me that was at the University of Houston and then University of Illinois. I've been my places. It was a real surprise at first, early in my career. Oh wait, I have to justify X or Y. I have to, where's our starting ground, And I suppose that's true for every person in community or in career, but leaving here, that was a big thing for me.
Thanks.
Anybody have anything else to bring? Okay, so I want to thank you all so much. This has been a joy. And I'm going to say into the mic that this was a joy. Thank you.